The 20-year, 7-step plan by Al-Qaeda for Islamic domination of the world is right on track. This is not fanciful in the least. We have a jihadist in the White House who is doing everything to help implement this 20-year Islamic plan. Obama has helped the Islamic State achieve its current size and strength by doing such things as this is nowhere near a comprehensive list. Sending them weapons and vehicles through Syrian rebels and through Benghazi, paying ISIS members monthly salaries, sending billions through various nefarious means, releasing terrorist leaders from Gitmo, even those known to have Stinger missiles and uranium, firing top commanders and thousands of troops, replacing them with illegal immigrants and Muslims, paying the mortgages of Muslims all over the world. Our entire government has been completely infiltrated by the Muslim Brotherhood, who now even have their own political party. The U.S. government even trained ISIS in secret camps in Jordan. Obama has been flooding our country with Muslims in preparation for the coming 2016 war. From opening our borders, to flying in Muslims, to their direct importation through the State Department by the thousands, to creating a hands-off list for special terrorists, our jihadist-in-chief is quickly establishing a large, Islamic army who will certainly begin operations by taking over the billions of dollars worth of military equipment that the DoD has flooded local law enforcement with. At this moment we have Islamic terrorists preparing for war with the American people in 35 training and recruitment camps all over the U.S. The FBI can do nothing about these camps, who openly train in guerrilla warfare and recruit others to their cause, because Obama won't classify the group that runs these camps as terrorist. These terrorists training right here on American soil will likely be the ones attacking local law enforcement to procure the military hardware as well as eliminate our veterans. Afterwards, it will be lone gun owners against a well-organized and trained enemy with full support of our own Muslim Brotherhood government, who will surely find some way to occupy much of our military beforehand. An Islamic Caliphate in 7 easy steps. In the introduction, the Jordanian journalist writes, I interviewed a whole range of Al-Qaeda members with different ideologies to get an idea of how the war between the terrorists and Washington would develop in the future. What he then describes between pages 202 and 213 is a scenario, proof both of the terrorists' blindness as well as their brutal single-mindedness. In 7 phases the terror network hopes to establish an Islamic Caliphate which the West will then be too weak to fight. The first phase, known as the Awakening, this has already been carried out and was supposed to have lasted from 2000 to 2003, or more precisely from the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 in New York and Washington to the fall of Baghdad in 2003. The aim of the attacks of 9/11 was to provoke the U.S. into declaring war on the Islamic world and thereby awakening Muslims. The first phase was judged by the strategists and masterminds behind Al-Qaeda as very successful, writes Hussein. The battlefield was opened up and the Americans and their allies became a closer and easier target. The terrorist network is also reported as being satisfied that its message can now be heard everywhere. The second phase, opening eyes, is, according to Hussein's definition, the period we are now in and should last until 2006. Hussein says the terrorists hope to make the Western conspiracy aware of the Islamic community. Hussein believes this is a phase in which Al-Qaeda wants an organization to develop into a movement. The network is banking on recruiting young men during this period. Iraq should become the center for all global operations, with an army set up there and bases established in other Arabic states. The third phase, this is described as a rising and standing up and should last from 2007 to 2010. There will be a focus on Syria, prophesies Hussein, based on what his sources told him. The fighting cadres are supposedly already prepared and some are in Iraq. Attacks on Turkey and, even more explosive, in Israel are predicted. Al-Qaeda's masterminds hope that attacks on Israel will help the terrorist group become a recognized organization. The author also believes that countries neighboring Iraq, such as Jordan, are also in danger. The fourth phase, between 2010 and 2013, Hussein writes that Al-Qaeda will aim to bring about the collapse of the hated Arabic governments. The estimate is that the creeping loss of the regime's power will lead to a steady growth in strength within Al-Qaeda. At the same time, attacks will be carried out against oil suppliers and the U.S. economy will be targeted using cyber terrorism. The fifth phase, this will be the point at which an Islamic State, or Caliphate, can be declared. The plan is that by this time, between 2013 and 2016, Western influence in the Islamic world will be so reduced and Israel weakened so much, that resistance will not be feared. Al-Qaeda hopes that by then the Islamic State will be able to bring about a new world order. The sixth phase, Hussein believes that from 2016 onwards there will be a period of total confrontation. As soon as the Caliphate has been declared, the Islamic Army, it will instigate the fight between the believers and the non-believers, which has so often been predicted by Osama bin Laden. The seventh phase, this final stage, is described as definitive victory. Hussein writes that in the terrorists' eyes, because the rest of the world will be so beaten down by the 1.5 billion Muslims, the Caliphate will undoubtedly succeed. This phase should be completed by 2020, although the war shouldn't last longer than 2 years. Source: Spiegel.de. More in-depth analysis of Al-Qaeda's plan. On August 12, 2005, Spiegel Online International published an article titled "The Future of Terrorism: What Al-Qaeda Really Wants." Written by Yassin Musharbash, the article was essentially a review of a book written by Fuad Hussein, a Jordanian journalist with close access to Al-Qaeda and its affiliates, including the late Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who pioneered the videotaping of beheadings to strike terror into the hearts of infidels. Quran 3:151. As Hussein explained in the introduction of his book Al-Zarqawi, Al-Qaeda's second generation, I interviewed a whole range of Al-Qaeda members with different ideologies to get an idea of how the war between the terrorists and Washington would develop in the future. And in fact, the book details the master plan of Al-Qaeda, in its second generation manifestation known as the Islamic State, which follows much of Zarqawi's modus operandi, to resurrect a caliphate. This plan is sufficiently outlandish that Yassin Musharbash, the author of the Spiegel article reviewing Hussein's book, repeatedly casts doubt on its feasibility. Thus Al-Qaeda's plan is proof both of the terrorists' blindness as well as their brutal single-mindedness. There is no way Al-Qaeda can follow the plan step by step. The idea that Al-Qaeda could set up a caliphate in the entire Islamic world is absurd. And the following scenario should be judged skeptically. Yet it is all the more remarkable that much of this plan, especially those phases dismissed as infeasible by Musharbash 4 and 5, have come to pass. In what follows, I reproduce the 7 phases of Al-Qaeda's master plan as presented in Musharbash's nearly 10-year-old article in bullet points and italics, bold for emphasis, with my commentary interspersed for context. Phases 4 and 5 are of particular importance as they describe the goals for recent times, much of which have come to fruition according to plan. An Islamic Caliphate in 7 easy steps. The first phase, known as the Awakening, this has already been carried out and was supposed to have lasted from 2000 to 2003, or more precisely from the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 in New York and Washington to the fall of Baghdad in 2003. The aim of the attacks of 9/11 was to provoke the U.S. into declaring war on the Islamic world and thereby awakening Muslims. The first phase was judged by the strategists and masterminds behind Al-Qaeda as very successful, writes Hussein. The battlefield was opened up and the Americans and their allies became a closer and easier target. The terrorist network is also reported as being satisfied that its message can now be heard everywhere. Much of this is accurate and makes sense. Sadly, if any eyes were opened after the 9/11 attacks on American soil, they weren't Western eyes, certainly not the eyes of Western leadership, mainstream media, and academia. But to many Muslims, the strikes of 9/11 were inspiring and motivating, giving credence to Osama bin Laden's characterization of America as a paper tiger. A few years after the Islamic strikes of 9/11, Americans responded by electing a man with a Muslim name and heritage for president, even as he continuously empowers in a myriad of ways, including banning knowledge of Islam, the same ideology behind the strikes of 9/11. Meanwhile, the average Muslim relearned the truths of their religion, namely that the infidel is an existential enemy and jihad against him is a duty, as Al-Qaeda and others had successfully shown. The second phase, opening eyes, is, according to Hussein's definition, the period we are now in, writing in 2005, and should last until 2006. Hussein says the terrorists hope to make the Western conspiracy aware of the Islamic community. Hussein believes this is a phase in which Al-Qaeda wants an organization to develop into a movement. The network is banking on recruiting young men during this period. Iraq should become the center for all global operations, with an army set up there in Ba.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Our very special guest this evening, Raymond Ibrahim, a Shillman Journalism Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, a Middle East and Islam specialist, and the author of the new book, Crucified Again, Exposing Islam's New War on Christians. Raymond, what an honor and privilege to have you back on the Glazov Gang.
Thank you for having me, Jamie. Always happy to be with you.
Okay, Raymond, we have some new rules at the Glazov Gang. We've become more populist and democratic. We let the guest begin with his own question to himself. What should the first question be?
Well, really, my first question, having watched it, is how could you keep a straight face during that Hannity, the Hannity thing that you were on, which is basically, you know, I appreciated it. I watched it, and you said everything that needs to be said, and yet you were the bad guy. You know, you're the evil guy because you spoke truth, and you were demonized. And I definitely appreciate your point, which is, you know, you're actually speaking up not just for non-Muslims, but for Muslims, who are the primary targets of Islam. So really, my first question to you is, you know, how do you keep a straight face, or more politically correct, how do you maintain your semblance before this sort of crowd?
Well, thanks, Raymond. I guess I didn't keep everything together because, as you saw, I got a little bit upset and agitated. But you know, sometimes just enough is enough, right? Because it's a vicious circle. What's happening is we try to say something about Islam. The whole society sticks to that it's radical Islam, and then the left starts blaming even those people for saying it, that they're perpetrating hate against Muslims. Then we explain that it's not hate against Muslims, that we love Muslim people, and of course not all Muslim people are terrorists, of course not. It's the teachings of Islam, and we're worried about if Muslims begin to follow those teachings, and then they get right back to the same old narrative, and it's just this vicious circle.
Absolutely, and that's the sort of thing that I and others have, of course, encountered, which is you know, here we are. You know, we're fighting. We're trying to get the truth out. I mean, with me, it's always about the truth. I don't even care if the truth is ugly. I don't care if the truth demonizes a particular segment of society. The truth is the truth, and we need to appreciate what the truth is, because, especially in a democracy, which is what the United States of America still styles itself as, and which, of course, it was founded upon, and which all those founders should be respected and adored for. But in a democracy, you know, it's all about getting the truth out and speaking the truth. And here we are, and it's ironic, as you yourself have experienced, to find that those who speak the truth, and you know, the truth sounds negative in its ostensible form to, you know, a particular populace, which is a very small populace, in fact, you know, Muslims, practicing, you know, literalist Muslims. And yet here we are talking about saving the lives of, you know, you were talking about, for example, Muslims in America, female Muslims who get killed in honor killings and whatnot. But the truth is, of course, if you go to the Islamic world itself, you know, the amount of people who are being persecuted and killed. You know, I talk about Christians, and they are number one on that list, but it far extends that. You know, if this is exactly why in Egypt you had this revolution, and of course the Muslim Brotherhood likes to blame it on the Christians because they can't embrace the fact that it was actually mostly Muslims who went out against them because they couldn't handle the draconian sort of law that they wanted to pull on everyone. And so they blame it on Christians and say only Christians and, you know, apostate Muslims who support Christians. In fact, it's humans who want to live according to a certain amount of decency and according to a certain amount of freedom, who want to do it without that. And whether they want to call themselves Muslims or not does not interest me. The point is, you have two sides. You have the side that wants some kind of freedom, and then you have the side that says no. And guess what? That side that says no always articulates its no in Islamic terms. And this is what's most frustrating, that fact that those people who are the most draconian, the most vicious, the most killing people are the ones who are naming it in Islam, and yet we can't talk about that.
Can't talk about it at all. It's too frightening for them. And what's interesting, you bring up the Hannity thing again, and we see it there with the Tamara Holder when she's yelling, apart from it, me and calling me names, when she was even saying about Brigitte Gabriel, you're trying to say that all Muslims are terrorists, and you're a dangerous person for saying that. Are you trying to say that all Muslims are terrorists? And Brigitte Gabriel never said that. I don't think any of us have ever said that, but they need to believe that we're saying that. And when we explain over and over again that we're actually not saying that, and we're actually saying, and they always return to how they know many good Muslim people, is if we're saying that there's no good Muslim people. Our main point is that there may be, even hypothetically, 99.999% of Muslims are quote-unquote good. Let's just say hypothetically, good according to our definition of good. The key is that they are considered bad by Islam, because Islam teaches Islamic supremacism. But they can't accept that dialogue because it's too frightening for them.
And that's exactly it, because once you pinpoint it and say that all the havoc and the chaos and the slaughters and the Christian persecution and the Baha'i persecution and the Sunni persecution and the Shia persecution falls down into the realm of Islamic jurisprudence, no one wants to accept that, because that means you have to accept that this is a part of the religion. And so it's much more comfortable to sit back and say, no, this is just a bunch of extremists, etc., etc. Let me tell you something about extremists. You know, we have a caliphate today, as you well know. The Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, which was formerly known from the acronym ISIS, now has declared itself as a caliphate. And guess what? I've studied what they've said, and everything they've said actually accords with Islamic law. Islamic law teaches A, the need for a caliphate, B, that when a caliph or a khalif, such as this, my namesake, Ibrahim guy, proclaims himself, that if it fits the criterion, and in the context of today, he does fit the criterion because there is no caliph, they're fighting against the infidels, that becomes the caliph. And if you really look at it, you know, Islam as a religion very much is supportive of everything that these guys are doing, from the killing, the slaughtering, the dhimmitude, as it's known, against Christians and other non-Muslims. All of this stuff has background, has backing in Islamic texts, and it's so disgusting to me to see all these people come on TV, including people who claim to be so-called conservatives, and go against you and go against others like myself who are pointing this out. And all they have to hold up to is, you know what, once in a while we can find a Muslim who doesn't do that. Yes, that's true. And once in a while you can find a Christian who doesn't turn the other cheek. We understand that. It's not about what people do. It's about what the religion teaches. And what the religion teaches is what we're seeing, which is causing chaos all throughout the Middle East, not to mention in Europe and North America.
Absolutely, Raymond. And then they get back to it again. But there's many Muslims who are moderate, and there's many Muslims, and again, we're not... You know, they just continue and continue. They can't get out of that narrative because the left shapes that paradigm. It shapes those boundaries of discourse, and it's up to us conservatives to keep banging away at it. Right. But the way that it stands right now, they keep making this about Muslims, where we're trying to say, forget about the number and percentages, whether it's all or few or anything. We're talking about what the Islam teaches and those that follow it. So therefore, it's incredible, the denial, Raymond, because everything we see, like for instance the videos lately, ISIS pulls over 3 truck drivers, comes up to them. They're not asking them what ice cream sandwiches they eat. They're not asking them what soccer games they like. They're not asking them what rap music they like. They're asking them how they pray, what rules they observe. And then when the questions aren't answered correctly, they get executed. Hello, what is this regarding?
Absolutely.
What is it regarding?
Well, exactly. What is it regarding? It all falls back to Islam. It's just amazing, you know, Jamie. I've looked at what the radicals, quote unquote, say. You know, let's stick to this ISIS or Islamic State. And what they say accords so much better with Islamic teaching than what so-called moderate Muslims say. And again, I don't discount, just like you don't, that there are so-called moderate Muslims. You know, Muslims are human beings. You know, you can believe it, you don't believe it, you moderate it, you change it, you make it fit your own worldview, you make it conform to, you know, the 21st century, whatever, and that's all good and more power to you. However, what do we do with all those other guys who, like Protestant Christians, let's say, because I was discussing this topic, you know, a Protestant Christian is someone who says, I don't care about the church, I don't care about any human's teaching, I care about what the scripture says. So what do you do with the fact that you got these Muslims, and that's exactly what they're saying, we care about what scripture, Islamic scripture says, the Quran, the Hadith. And, well, guess what? Most people don't bother looking into what Islamic scripture says, but it says basically what the Islamic State, the Caliphate, is doing, which is to slaughter everyone, to impose dhimmitude and discrimination on those who don't accept the Islamic way, and to basically build up a militant, hostile state that goes on and expands as much as it can. And this is a reality, and what's sad about this is this reality is so well documented in the core texts of Islam, whether it's the Quran or the Hadith or the ulama, you know, the standard bearers of Islam, the learned ones. And they say all of this, X, Y, and Z, which is basically hostile to anything and everything that the West believes. And yet here we are, and then, but because, like you said, you know, people don't want to accept that, so then all you have to do is find one Muslim who says, oh, I don't believe in that, and there it goes. That Muslim becomes the paradigm. He's the paradigm, or she, for Islam.
And
when
then,
in reality, go ahead. Yeah, when in reality,
and then it just turns back again to, oh, Jamie's wrong. I know this really nice Muslim family that lives down the street. And it just continues and continues. Because no matter how many times we explain it, and what you just said, it is so terrifying for so many of these people to accept what that actually implies. Because if you actually accept that Islam is the problem, Raymond, a lot of people need to get through the day. You and I can get through the day for various reasons, knowing the truth. But for a lot of people, there's many different reasons here, of course. But for a lot of people, it's just too terrifying to accept what it means and what's ahead. So they need to demonize us rather than accept the truth.
And I would tell those people, you know, I mean, the narrative that they come from is this. Okay, so Muslims in whatever country, whether it's Iraq, Egypt, Nigeria, whatever, are angry, are upset, and they're articulating their frustration through, you know, religion, through Islam. Okay, so guess what? Here's the reality. You go around the whole world, and you're going to find, A, there's more Christians than are Muslims. B, there are more Christians who are suffering any number of, you know, depredations that Muslims are suffering, from poverty, from economic strife, from political suppression. This is happening all throughout the world, in Africa to Christians, in South America to Christians, in Asia to Christians. And my question to all these people is, since the Islamists are responding through an Islamic paradigm, why are we not seeing Christians doing the same thing? How come it's not the same problem? Why don't we see tons of Christians in South America who blow themselves up and say, instead of Allah Akbar, Allah is greater, saying Jesus is greater? We don't see that. And my argument would be because Christianity does not allow for that. It does not allow for a person to become violent, vicious, suicidal, whatever, homicidal, and then mention Christianity. And that's why we don't have it, because they can't do it. That's not to say that there aren't people who affiliate themselves with Christianity who are violent, but the point is, it's amazing to me that we have all these Muslims who articulate all their violence and viciousness through Islam and who quote scripture, and yet we don't have one single example of this from Christians. And yet here we have all the same liberals saying it's the same thing, it's the same exact thing.
And no matter how many times you say it, even on the Hannity segment in the commercial break, one of the women there says to me, "Oh, but the Crusades, and I mean Christianity in the past," and then I responded, "But you know, there's no theological basis. If those people did such and such, they can't quote verses of Christianity or the New Testament the way that Muslims can justify what they do. It means that they're violating Christian ethics." And then there's silence, but I know that she'll return to that argument later because they need this for their own psychological makeup. Let's substantiate our point a little bit by a phenomena occurring throughout everything we're seeing today, Raymond. Many horrifying videos on Facebook. Some of them you can't escape. Sometimes to even keep a peace of mind, I try to not watch some of them or many of them. But I do, as you know, as an observer and somebody that's studying and trying to fight for freedom, we have to see this evil. I think it was in Syria or in some places, but we're hearing a lot of different languages. There were some jihadists killing some innocent, I think they could have been Christians, they could have also been Muslims. They're just killing everybody. But I heard the Russian language. It was a little bit Chechen or Russian. There's a lot of foreign fighters coming to Syria, to Iraq, to all these places. We're seeing many different languages, many foreigners. I don't think that these are just people that, "Oh, I want to go kill," or "My hockey team is different." Again, something else is motivating these people. Talk a little bit about the foreign fighters appearing in these Middle East conflicts and what it means to us and what it means, period.
Sure, Jamie. As the Western mainstream media and the government continues to portray the rebellion against Assad, the president of Syria, and I'm not a defender of Assad or anything like that. I'm a practical person. I'm looking for the least violent person to be in charge. But when you look at the people that they portray, guess what? Like you just said, most of them are not even Syrian. Most of them are from Chechnya, like you heard. I watched the video and it brought people from Philippines, from Malaysia, from Nigeria, from Somalia, from, of course, all these European nations, from America. And it's funny for me because when I watch this is deja vu. I'm watching Afghanistan 1990s reoccur. In Afghanistan, again, we were told, "Oh, look, we have freedom fighters who want to get off the Soviet Union yoke," which is all fine and good. But in fact, guess what? A lot of them were Arabs. That's where Al-Qaeda was founded, in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden, Ayman Zawahiri, both Arabs. And they went to the theater of war, the jihad, which at that point in time in history was in Afghanistan. Today, in our time, the theater of war is in Syria. And so you're getting jihadists come and fight. Now, why are they doing it? Is it because they're nationalists? Of course not. They're not even Syrian, just like they weren't Afghanis. So why are they doing it? They're doing it because they're trying to find a vacuum where they can come and build an emirate. And they just did. Now you have the Islamic State, formerly known as ISIS. And this is what we're helping. This is what we're supporting in the context of, look, people rebelling against tyranny. And it all sounds well and good to your Western mindset until you realize what really is going on, which is these aren't even people who are citizens in this country. They're foreigners. They're coming to fight, to create, and to carve a niche for themselves in the name of caliphate.
When you say we, you're referring to the Obama administration.
Right. No, not you and I.
No, I understand. I understand.
Yes.
I just want to crystallize the point for our viewers. Is it fair and justified, Raymond, to say that Obama is enabling jihad?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this president, above any other president, you can say former presidents have been naive or whatever word or adjective you want to use, but this president has known better. I mean, this president comes from an Islamic background. If this president, as an American, on the one hand, here's what I'm trying to say. On the one hand, as a president, as an American president, coming from an Islamic background, this man knew so much. He could be way better than a George Bush because he knows what Islam's about. And yet this president who comes from that background, who went to madrasas, mosques, Islamist mosques in Indonesia, whose father is a Muslim, and we want to blow that off as, oh, well, that doesn't affect him. But no, it does. The sons are the sons of their fathers. And here you have this president doing X, Y, and Z, all of it enabling, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood plus Al-Qaeda in Libya, the jihadist, Islamist, terrorist murderers in Syria and elsewhere. And we see the same thing going on in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we see this, and you know that this guy, of all presidents, knows better, just like I do. I know better because I'm from this background. My family's from the Middle East. I understand this. I don't need someone to teach me. I'm not brainwash or kind of, whatever. You know what I'm saying.
Raymond, with the few minutes we have left, you just referred to yourself and your family. Just have a few minutes left. Who is Raymond Ibrahim? How did you come to this battle, and why are you so wise and noble?
Well, first, thank you for that. I came to this battle. I was born in this nation, but my parents, who are Egyptian Copts, left Egypt in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, when I was born. And they came to America, and I grew up, and I had a natural interest in the Middle East, and I studied it medieval, historically, modern era. And the more I studied it, and I also traveled back and forth to the Middle East, Egypt, and other countries. And, every time I traveled, it only verified what I read and what I learned, not from my professors, but from the ancient texts. And this is what's so sad, if you read the historical texts, the documented texts written by Muslims, for crying out loud, not even written by, biased Westerners or Christians, written by Muslims, and you read about the sort of, the Islamic historical texts actually boast of the fact that the infidels in Egypt, the Copts, were attacked, their churches were destroyed, and then in droves and thousands they would convert, and then they boast of that as proof of Islam's power. And then you see what's happening today, you connect the dots, it all makes sense. So basically from, my own studies and my own background, I've always had an interest in this, and that's why it's sad, because I'm trying to open minds, and what I'm talking about ultimately is common sense. I think what I'm saying, a little child from a couple hundred years ago would understand, but today, because of all this political correctness, which you yourself have suffered from, and the censorship, it's so hard just to get a simple, plain message out, and no one wants to embrace it.
Absolutely, Raymond. We have run out of time. Thank you so much for everything that you do, and also, of course, for shedding a light on the persecution of Christians throughout the world and in the Middle East. I don't think our Christian president has yet to do that. It's called Crucified Again, Raymond's new book. Get it. And Raymond Ibrahim, thank you so much for joining the Glazoff Gang.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Very happy to do it, and thank you for keeping up the good fight.
Thank you, and we'll see you soon, Raymond, and we'll see you soon on the Glazoff Gang. Good night.